Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so sorry. I need to apologize. I was having some technical difficulties getting my computer and running.
Well, this is interesting. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. We just can't see you. I can see your
My
background.
background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes when that happens, it's the shutter was closed on the camera. I know that's happened to me a few times.
Oh, that's strange because I actually have a little thing that I put over my camera. I've never actually.
Well,
Oh, there it is.
there you are.
Brilliant. Yeah. I'm glad
I'm
you were
so
there. 'Cause that
sorry.
was,
Technical difficulties today.
yeah. All right. Let's grab my agenda here. Right. So, good morning. I'm Kim Craven. It is 8:09, and we'll open the Finance Committee subcommittee of the North Middlesex Regional School District. And just to let everyone know, this meeting is being recorded. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from December 16th. Everyone had a chance to look at those.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Can't do that yet. Let's do a roll call of members
Oh,
that are
right.
here.
Oh,
Roll call
okay.
first.
Um, I am Kim Craven. I am here. Lisa Martin,
Here.
Mike Lavoisier,
Here.
and Keenan Francois is excuse absent today. And from the administration, while not voting members, we have Nancy Haynes, Jeremy Hanman, Brad Morgan, Kevin Cormier, and of course Robin Ivy. And now we can.
I don't know if
discuss
we
the
want
minutes.
to note that, just for the record, that Randy is in attendance.
Okay, as
Yeah,
yeah,
she's logged
okay.
in. I just haven't promoted her as a panelist. If you want me to, I can. I just wanted to note for the record that she's in attendance.
She's not a subcommittee member, so I'm guessing that would be out of order.
Okay.
But thank you for letting me know that. Let's move to the approval of the minutes from December 16th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Lisa Martin, second by Mike Lavoisier, and roll call vote. Lisa Martin,
Yes.
Mike Lavoisier,
Yes.
and I'm Kim Craven, and I am a yes. Did we have anyone for the first public comment today?
Let me check. No, we have no one for public comment.
Okay. Moving to the next item on the agenda, the FY26 budget. And Nancy, are there any updates that you can provide us on the spending to date?
No, I've been following it, but I haven't seen any major changes from our last meeting.
Okay. So suffice that to say that there's nothing that is going to be looking like there's requests for overages or any adjustments.
We will end up probably having a transfer at some point. But at this moment, it's not absolutely necessary because those sections I can have them covered at the moment. At some point, I'll need to have the finance subcommittee approve a list of transfers between lines. But probably maybe I'll be ready at the next meeting. But some of it I'm waiting on some of the tuition and out of district costs before we do it, because if those change dramatically one way or another in the next few months, then it would be unnecessary. So I'll just, if I can just hold, that'll be, and take that up in a later date.
Okay. I think it would be good as we're moving into the next budget year to take a look at any of those just as reference points.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Does any of the members have any questions on the FY26 budget?
No.
None from me.
Okay, thanks. So let's move into the FY27, the budget planning. Obviously, in the packet and in our email, we had all received a copy of the budget message for the upcoming year. And let me open it up. We have a lot of different categories that we've been discussing, ways to address the budget. I'd like to open it up to the administration if you have any opening comments before we start our discussion.
I don't have any at this point, unless there are questions from the Finance Committee. We can certainly just do a quick overview of the FY27, if that would be helpful.
Sure, you give that overview.
Sure. So the FY27 budget, and some of these numbers have been shared, again, where it's just still really in draft form. These numbers were discussed at our most recent budget summit. So they were shared with town leadership, letting them know, of course, again, this is just all draft at this point, just to give them a heads up. And they have been sharing their budgets with us as well, or their proposed budgets, or where they may land. And at this point, we're looking at a 3.06% increase to FY26. For the most part, it really is a level service budget. We are using or recommending to use $2 million in excess and deficiency, which again is a very high number. And certainly just some concerns, because our current budget, our recommended budget increase of 3.06 is beyond what the towns can afford. The towns, at least one town, has asked us already to consider closing a second building, which is really not doable at this point in time, as far as the central office team is concerned. And, the reality is that we made, in addition to the consolidation last year, we made cuts in other areas coming pretty close to $1 million, and what was really a reduction of close to a total of $2 million to make our FY26 budget work. So the hope, I think, from the administrative team is that we can avoid having to look at closing a second building, and that potentially if we can get some more money back from the state to be able to reinstate some of these positions to alleviate some class size concerns, but also some of the issues that are being created by, not keeping up with technology due to reductions there, as well as reductions to curriculum and instruction. And quite honestly, there's just, at least from a concern that central office has, is that as we're looking at FY27 in using $2 million of E&D, again, that's a very high number and not something that we should be moving away from that, as opposed to continuing to use E&D, is that as we look to FY28, the issue we're going to have is when FY27 closes, so do all 5 of our collective bargaining agreements. So we will need to be negotiating next fiscal year all 5 of our CBAs, which I would imagine would come in the vicinity of at least $1 million as far as a budgetary impact to the district. So just keeping that in mind, that's what we're looking at right now. And hopeful that if we do get extra monies, that money will be able to be utilized to alleviate, first and foremost, some of the class size concerns that we have. I don't know, Nancy, Jeremy, Kevin, anything you'd like to add?
I think you pretty much covered it, short of any questions the committee members might have.
Yeah, and I guess my only addition would be that we should be coming into some of the more um, settled health insurance rates relatively soon. Maybe in the next couple weeks, I would say that we'll have a pretty good idea. I'm hoping for the GIC assessment in the next few weeks as well. So between now and when the governor's proposal comes out, we should have a few more answers on some of those line items that we have in the budget.
The only other thing that I wanted to add is that, and again, I don't have a definitive number on this, but I do know that we have a number of staff in the district that are not, and I have not looked at the numbers on this, and I'm not even sure it would be possible to determine an actual number, but we do have a number of staff in the district that have spouses that are teachers elsewhere. And many districts have GIC. And if the GIC numbers are going up as they're projecting, we could see a number of staff who may be getting health insurance from their spouse through the GIC, which is pretty comparable right now rate-wise, shifting back to North Middlesex next year because of what's projecting to be a large increase to GIC rates. I know last year it was pretty close, but certainly something for us to consider is that even a small shift in health insurance could have a pretty significant cost to the district if that in fact happens. And I know of a number of people that may be in that situation next year because it looks like our increase, based on what we're hearing, is not going to be as high as GIC.
And you're predicting those numbers should be out fairly soon. Is it something that can be proactively requested once those numbers come out of the staff to see if they're going to switch?
I think once the numbers come out, we can certainly do a survey. The problem is going to be is that I don't know if they're actually going to have the numbers until the open enrollment process begins to actually see
the difference.
what the final numbers are and where they fall. In some cases, someone that's in GIC may just change their plan. Where in other cases, our HMO Blue plan may be a much better option for some people that may be on GIC now.
Okay.
So that may not be able to happen. We may not be able to do that until the springtime, I guess is what I'm saying, when they actually see the numbers and they can compare the plans.
Okay. So unfortunately, an unknown for us as you go through the budgeting. So that can be an unexpected change to any budget that you set. Okay. Thanks for making us aware of that. From the budget message perspective, for the members of the subcommittee, what questions do you have for the administration?
Was that directed right at me, Kim, or did you, or Mike or I?
Yeah.
Either of you.
I'm looking at it, and I don't know if I have any specific questions. I mean, so the tuition to non-public schools is going down a bunch. I assume that's just fewer students going to non-public schools because we're bringing more back into the district, or at least that's the plan.
Yeah, so if I could respond to that. The tuitions this year are running lower overall across the board. So we're seeing lower numbers than we originally projected for FY26.
Okay.
We're following it this year. So again, that translates into lower numbers for 27, theoretically. And both the director of special education and myself keep a very close eye on that right now, because if there's any major changes mid-year, we would want to capture those for both this year in 26 and next year in 27.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good news in the sense that it could be a result of some students coming back, but it also could be students aging out once they hit um, 22, age 22, they might age out of programs. So she has a more specific list on any ups and downs as far as tuitions or transportation.
Mhm.
As far as special ed transportation goes, we're also watching that. We have a this is our final year with our vendor, and we have the option of extending that contract for an additional year. And we've been in discussion about that, but I don't believe a final decision has been made.
Okay. Thank you.
Nancy, when you say extend that, is that extend at the current the terms, or do you have an opportunity to renegotiate if you extend a year?
There's a clause in the contract to extend for year 4 and 5 at a minimum of 4%. I believe we can negotiate either way, but we're kind of projecting that on average it's likely to be around 5% increase in the special ed transportation. But again, we haven't gone through that process yet.
Okay. And what is the earliest time you can start to go through that?
I would say really any time. I mean, we should be able to get that going. Brad, do you have any feedback on that at all for extending the special ed transportation contract?
And not at this point. I think we have to have further discussions with Vanpool.
Yeah. And you know, depending on how this year goes and how the ridership has been, there may be there definitely could be some conversations with Vanpool on that.
And realizing that there's limited options when it comes to school-based transportation. It's not like that the district is in the driver's seat to have all these different vendors at our sort of heels wanting the contract, but I don't know the thoughts of the other committee members, but from my perspective, anytime we have the opportunity to ask those that are benefiting from the district and their role in it, if we're all cutting back to see if they can at least level it out for a year and not go up or go down some percentages. So what are the thoughts of the other committee members?
So are you, I mean, all right, so you're saying that basically go and ask the transportation companies to accept less money instead of more? Because I mean, you could ask, but I'm 99% sure the answer will be no.
It might be no. It might be yes. I mean, if they're evaluating some of their fixed costs, if their fuel costs have gone down, if the ridership has gone down, if there's anything within that contract that can be negotiated, even just a 0.5% off, of what the intended increase was. If we're all looking at cutbacks, I think just again from my perspective, the answer is always no if we don't ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that we may actually be in a little bit stronger of a position this year to look at any potential reduction on an intended increase or a projected increase that Vanpool or even D is doing, only because again, from what I'm hearing from other districts is that some of the budget issues this year seem to be statewide as opposed to, the past couple of years have been just regionals. So I think that, there are several other districts, even districts to our east, that are going to see significant issues this coming year. And the big issue that's out there is what's going to happen with federal funding, especially around Title I, as we go into FY 27. So, if that money is truly impacted next year and we don't receive it, what is that going to look like? So, and that's something all districts are going to have to deal with. But on top of that, all districts are dealing with these large increases. First and foremost, many of them are GIC, so they're going to be dealing with that significant health insurance increase. So it's something that we're all sharing in, I think, at this point in time.
Okay.
I do think it's worth the ask to ask Vanpool. Always worth the ask.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, like Brad had mentioned, that health insurance is going to drive us a lot here. And there are the unknowns. And I know that even there's a potential of people losing their jobs and things in the economy. And I think we have to be careful with how, because they could be coming to us for the health insurance. So,
Right. And just to share too, I think that's the biggest concern that the towns have as well, is that health insurance piece and what that is going to look like. So I think we're all concerned and looking at what the looming figure is going to be. And again, based on what we're hearing, it does not appear as though our increase is going to be as high as others. But there is, of course, going to be a substantial increase nonetheless.
Brad, how much do we take in for Title I money from the federal? I know it's.
I would need either Gary or Nancy to answer that, but we do have a pretty robust Title I program in the district. Nancy, do you know what we bring in for that? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I don't have that number in front of me.
Yeah, it's for FY26 this year is 386,000, just over that. 386,619. And we do in that preliminary, just to let you know, that's in there. There's a lot in that budget message, but towards the end of the message, we have a section where we've put in the federal grants that we've received for FY26 so far. So if you wanted to, I think it's like right towards the end, page 33.
One thing that in going through the budget message, adding to the work, of course, having all the titles with a table of contents with live links into the document would be really helpful, just for future. You don't have to do it for this one because this one's done, of course. Yeah, so when I look at those grants, and I know you can only apply for what is out there, it does seem like you're getting several smaller ones, and that Title I is just under 400. And those grants need to be essentially over and above what your regular, do they all have non-supplant clauses in them, where it has to be something that is not replacing?
I mean, for the most part, I would say yes, they should be non-supplant. There are some, I think, like I'm not sure if like the life sciences STEM grant has any language like that in there. Do you know, Kevin? Okay. I don't believe so. Sometimes the private grants won't have those kind of stipulations.
Restrictions. Okay. Okay. So staying on that page, actually, there's a question. So when we look at the E&D that's at the top of that page, going from the FY14 through the FY 2024, and the change, and this is for the municipal side, I can't remember the percentage, but I had run the analysis of how many municipalities are going into and using all their free cash. It was very high. We're not unique, whether it's on the school side or the municipal side, but there was some higher years, 16 and 17, with a higher remaining balances, and then it coming down. And so interestingly, the shift of increase in use of E&D, at the same time, the enrollment is going down. So when community members or folks are looking at that, and you explain in there about the additional sort of strain on the budget from the special education and the needs of the students, is that what you would say is one of the main drivers of your longitudinal increase in the budget? Like if we're having this decreasing enrollment but increasing costs, is that one of the main drivers, that the specialized um
Well, I think,
that's happening?
yeah, I mean, there's definitely that as a driver, as far as what, students' needs, and especially, as we've gone through COVID and come out of COVID. But also just having a very limited increase in any other revenue for our budget. So it just continues to be that pressure on the budget. Even if we level fund it, we have no other new sources of funding.
Right. Again, and I would just say that,
Becomes a math problem.
even with, they haven't updated the per pupil costs, I think since 2023. So right now we're around $19,500 per student. Even our in-district students that are in special education, you could argue inclusion, just, with limited support, not even specialized programs, or sub-separate programs as they're referred to often. Those students are requiring much more than $19,500 a year to educate. So we have the students that we may, the best option is to move some students out of district, so in order to ensure that they get the education that they need, and we're able to utilize some circuit breaker money. But even with that, that is still far beyond the $19,500. So the issue is that even though our enrollment's dropping, our special education population is increasing. I do think a part of that is post-COVID, because students fell behind and parents in turn requested that their students be tested. And oftentimes when you test a student, you can find something, especially when they have advocates and attorneys that are working with them. So that's really the issue that's driving. I think that's our most significant budget driver. That's not, health insurance or collective bargaining agreements or transportation, is that special education piece, and how those, students that are on IEPs and even multilingual students are costing more than $19,500 to educate. So that is a significant issue that we're continuing to face. And in turn, we're hiring more special education and MLL staff because it's mandated both at the federal and state levels. And then we're reducing general education staff because that isn't mandated. So we have to make the cuts somewhere.
And I would also say that the declining enrollment's spread out, right? So if you have 20 kids that are one grade level in one building, you could make a reduction that would reflect that. But if you have 20 kids that are one kid in 20 classrooms, you're not going to make any cuts that reflect that. We're going to have less revenue coming in because we have 20 fewer kids, but there's nothing we can do to offset that. So you have to be careful when you just kind of point to declining enrollment, because it doesn't actually mean there's a measurable impact somewhere that we can offset that.
Right. So I tried to, I created a little one pager. I can't get it on the camera for you guys to see. But just looking at like the change areas, the overall increase, health insurance increase, salaries could be because of collective bargaining, the transportation, special education tuition. So those are like biggest changes. And then budget drivers, I've got the IEPs and things of that nature, the premium cost, contractual growth with transportation, contractual growth for the collective bargaining, and then like trying to look at savings opportunities. So special education expansion, maximizing what we can with transportation. I know early on, the superintendent, there had been some consolidations that happened, some work that had been done with D-Bus to save time and make that most efficient. And then the biggest thing when I look at this is the building reconfiguration. And I know that that is a really sensitive subject. And then the other savings, is the infrastructure. Like, how do we maximize the facilities, the technology, things like that. So this is not, unplanned replacements. And then looking at what all the reserves are. with, you know, where are their funds? Are there times when you're consistently, and I know Kevin, you were looking at the under spent categories to see if there was any consistency there. If there's any way to look at that without the impact. And then in reviewing the impact from the closure of Ashby, looks like it was a uh, about 11 person actual cut, not reallocation of staff that resulted in that. So that impacts your class size. So if we're, you know, just kind of thinking ahead, and I capture that for myself after trying to read the budget message so that I can weed through it, right? So if I'm on the committee, we meet, I'm looking at this stuff a lot. One is, what is the message from the message for the community members so that they can understand it? I think there's a few things that we're faced with is over the amount of what the municipalities say that they could contribute on the school department with all the other departments they have to consider. If there's an override, which has been, you know, a challenge for the communities to do an override, the whys of what it is, and then for our perspective, long range, looking at the issue of municipal owned buildings with no control over the maintenance and the planning versus school department owned buildings. While I know it's all in the municipality, I think that's a little bit of the struggle of what we're looking at is, you know, how do you maximize the facilities that you have when there's sort of issues at hand, potentially with one of the facilities that I'm not sure, you know, when it comes to the Ashby facility, we had that as one of the topics, is like, do we have any more information on that ADA compliance issue? Because that, in order to build the budget and look at the budget objectively, the consideration of Ashby, while there was the initial savings, what happens now? And do we have anything back yet on the ADA compliance issue?
Not as of yet. I believe Lisa reached out to the TA in Ashby either over the weekend or on Monday, asking for an update. We have not heard of anything. I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to speak to that at all. I know you were involved in some of those discussions.
Yes. Brad, Kevin, and I all attended, as well as Dave Amari, the Buildings and Grounds Director. My personal sense from the people from the state who came to look at it is that the ramp is not significantly out of compliance, but it was, I think, about 1 degree out of compliance, which was, it sounded, based on the discussion, it sounded like that was going to be enough. There was also a couple of other issues that I can see when it was installed were easily overlooked, where there's no lower railing for wheelchairs that is continuous. So the break where there's vertical supports becomes an issue, which makes the width of the ramp an issue as well, because we can't install a lower railing without moving the railing entirely. It is wide enough right now, but not once that railing is installed. There was also questions on the turnaround, and they also questioned the lack of railing coming up from the parking lot area, as well as the need for handicap spaces towards the top. The need for handicap spaces towards the top sounded like it might include some need to do some regrading to ensure that there are level handicap spaces. We don't have the actual findings. That's based purely on conversations that were occurring. We did, some of the district representatives went into the building afterwards to take a look at a couple of things, having heard that discussion, because the investigation was specific to that front entryway, and therefore they limited themselves to that front entryway with no interest in looking at other areas. But based on what we learned from those discussions, we personally felt, or at least I personally felt, I'll speak for myself, that the entrance that Ashby, the town leadership in Ashby, wanted to propose as an alternative handicap access probably would not meet compliance because the door cannot be opened full 90 degrees based on the swing and where the wall juts out a little bit. There's also a heater that we believe is a little bit too close to meet with, and it does not include any looks at the chairlift going down to the cafeteria area, which we don't know yet, but I'm guessing will likely need to be examined or evaluated to some degree prior to opening the building. My concern is that that front entry is going to cost some level of money, but I believe, depending upon how strict someone gets, the lift down to the cafeteria area is probably the bigger concern.
Mhm.
Something else to consider too was that while we were there, I know that there was at least one community member who was not happy that other things were not looked at up to and including the inside of the building and the playground area. And I can't imagine that individual is not going to push that those items be looked at as well, where they were not looked at the first time around. So there's the possibility for more to be coming from the person that actually filed the complaint in the first place.
So in budget planning, it means that if there's any type of reconfiguration. So right now, a reconfiguration in my mind is moving kids back into that facility as an option. If that were ever to be an option, this would have to be addressed first. And if it's addressed and the school is using it, that becomes, I'm guessing, please correct me if I'm wrong, a liability now on our part, or would that be a liability on the town's part?
I think it depends. I could probably speak to that. I think it depends on how that was funded. So if it's a relatively small cost, like say maybe some minor adjustments to a ramp or something like that, it's possible the district could cover that with some of the capital planning money.
Okay.
So that could be one way to approach covering those costs. If the costs get extensive, where that's not a possibility, then it would end up likely being something that we would take a vote, school committee would take a vote on to borrow the money. In that case, if we were to go to a larger cost, say warrant article, the school committee would vote first, and then it would go to the 3 towns to approve that borrowing. So all 3 towns, it's unanimous to borrow money, would have to take a vote. If they decided that they didn't need to take a vote, say, and this has happened in the past, I'm sure some of you have heard this before, but I know this, Mike wasn't here back then, but sometimes the towns don't necessarily have any impact, and the way that the costs are allocated is based on the number of students in the building. So if we needed to make, say, renovations that required borrowing money for Ashby, the current regional agreement says that the school committee would make a determination as to who would have been in that building. And this has happened before with Squanicook, where there was very few students in the building. One of the driving reasons we've been looking at the regional agreement, because it doesn't really have a mechanism for like a district-owned building on how that debt would be allocated. So in any case, long story short, if the school committee decided that there was a project there that required borrowing, it would go through that process, require town meeting approvals, at least by Ashby. And if the other towns didn't want to vote, for instance, they could elect not to vote. And if 60 days passes, then it's deemed passed.
Okay.
And Nancy, does that have to pass by 2/3 or all three towns?
All three towns
All three.
for debt, if it was a debt service borrowing. Alternatively, I think we could look at, and again, it depends on if school's involved or not, but the towns certainly can raise money for their building. They could do a warrant article too. So that would be outside of the school committee, though. That would be their decision to do that.
Okay. So essentially, looking at different documents here, but the projection of reconfiguration and reopening for students to use Ashby, the 1.6 could be closer to 2 million, or we don't know, right? So I'm just putting a cost out there for the repairs, as opposed to keeping that status quo and not considering that part of reconsideration for any cost savings. Like, I'm just, as a finance committee, when I look at this and the numbers that you've presented and talking it through, with our colleagues in the full school committee, it seems very difficult to try to put forth a budget from the administration that would include that when we don't know what the results are yet of that walkthrough audit that happened on the 18th. We don't know the cost implications. And then even to do that, to get students back in, if there was even a vote accepted by all the communities to have that happen, my thought is that even if you know that you get the vote through, it's not possible to even have that work done once town meetings happen, if it was voted in, if those costs were voted in, because it would have to be part of an override, would not even allow the school to be open in September, because by the time you go out to contract, get bids in. Am I looking at that timeline correctly?
So I think, unfortunately, you're very accurate on it's a big unknown. I'd say the 1.6 is, if anything, a conservative number in costs for reopening, because I know certain aspects like security system upgrades were based on a pared down and wiring costs from about a year ago. But the ADA compliance is the big question mark, and I think that could be, it depends upon what else gets questioned and what doesn't meet compliance. And I think it starts with the findings from the most recent complaint. That could be anywhere from a few thousand to quite a bit, as you indicated. I'd hate to throw a number at it. Yeah. Time frame also kind of depends, because it depends on what we are required to do in order to open. If the concerns remain purely based on the list that the district provided to the school committee, plus the entryway, I hate to put too much of a time frame on it. Nancy might be able to chime in, but I would hazard a guess probably somewhere in the 4 months range, assuming that it's kind of limited to redoing that front entry, but that probably is conservative as well. It really depends on the scope, and we would need a contractor to give us a better idea of what that would take. If it were to involve more, such as the access to the cafeteria, I think then yes, we'd be looking at a much larger time frame.
Mm-hmm. So, Lisa and Mike, I'd love to hear from you on this topic, because we have, as part of budget planning, reconfiguration. Mm-hmm. And so I have a thought, but Lisa, I see your hand up, so I'm going to ask you your thoughts.
So, talking about the ADA compliance within the front of the building and the ramp, what is the amount that triggers all of it to be done? Like, because we've talked about an amount that will trigger something. Nancy, I know we've talked about it, and the triggers that everything be done. if you do a certain construction amount. Is that right?
Yeah, there's different rules about it, so I don't want to just arbitrarily say it, but the last time I looked at it, it's a percentage of the value of the building. So I believe it was like 35%. Don't quote me on that number. If you are constructing or reconstructing 35% cost, then you'd be required to bring everything up to compliance.
But there is a trigger. There's a trigger out there.
Yeah,
that
there
if we
is.
go,
But small projects generally wouldn't hit that threshold, so you wouldn't be required to do that. Again, we'd have to, depending on what project we're doing and how much that costs and its impact. Now, having said that, the inspection, obviously that we'd probably be required to do that with whatever those changes are if we were given a response on that. It's also possible they might allow us some grace period to get those done. So I don't think they would necessarily, usually they'll work with you on ADA compliance for, especially if, you're on the way to doing them.
So just as a thought experiment, let's suppose the ADA compliance issue could be resolved for a relatively low cost. Let's just imagine that the remaining costs that are associated with reconfiguration, with reopening AES, obviously the majority of it is staffing, it's salaries and benefits and whatnot, and then there's all the various other things that need to be addressed, that the security system, network switches, et cetera, but really all of that is relatively marginal compared to just the cost of staffing the building, correct? Like that's the majority of it. So if we're gonna reconfigure, reopen AES, we have to contend with how do we absorb that cost, or how do we deal with that additional cost, correct? Like that's kind of the major issue there.
So I would just alert the finance committee to the reality that the numbers we've come up with are in the $1.6 million neighborhood to reopen Ashby Elementary. In addition to that, that would require another significant move, which our staff would likely not be able to do again because it created all sorts of issues for them last year. The other piece that the committee would need to consider is it would, for all intents and purposes, overextend the amount that we would like our current budget. If you look at our current budget ask and the E&D amount, it's likely going to overextend that. And then on top of that, we're going to have our 5 CBAs to negotiate next year. Mm-hmm. And just to point out, the towns have repeatedly asked, including the Ashby TM, for us to be looking at closing a second building. So that's, I'm not sure how we would create a situation where we're not closing at least, or keeping one building closed. And it's important to point out that right now, Spalding really can't be one of those, because if it were, just because of the sheer size of Spalding, which we owe the least amount of clawback money from MSBA on Spalding. But Spalding is the largest building of the 3 that could be considered by far. Squanicook would be far too expensive to close because we still have debt service on that. But if we were to ever consider closing Spalding, we would likely have to redistrict at least 4th grade into Hawthorne Brook, possibly more than just 4th grade. And then we would eliminate the possibility for there to be any type of relief at Varnum Brook, where all of our special education programs currently are. Now, when we moved the programs to Pepperell back, 5-6 years ago, it made sense because the majority of the students were from Pepperell, and the programs weren't as large as they are now. Our programs have grown, And in fact, some of our programs have more Townsend students than Pepperell students in them. So any type of redistricting that would include potentially the closure of a building, which to me, we have to take a building offline because we have space. At least for the time being, we have space. And I don't know where else we're making that money up. That's going to create a problem. And right now, that problem at Varnum Brook is pretty significant. They absolutely need some assistance. And we need to look at spreading out some of those programs, potentially looking at moving the STEPS program to Townsend altogether. But again, we're going down that path of, if we're going to talk about reopening a building, using all of our free cash without knowing what will happen in FY28, without knowing what will happen with federal funding, without knowing what will happen with our CBAs. And to be frank, our CBAs are going to come at an increase because we have to compete now with all of the other districts that are paying their staff. And there's not a pool, as I've mentioned several times before, of qualified teachers, especially, that are coming out of college now. There is a significant national shortage of educators. So we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're spending money on buildings as opposed to staff, and then we can't afford to keep the talented staff that we have in place. That's just my opinion, but I think that that's kind of the situation that we're in right now. And I think our priority should be looking at class sizes and how do we alleviate some of the issues that last year's budget reductions have created.
Yeah. Yeah, from my perspective, I agree with that, because the class size issue has been an issue this school year. My son's class is 28 or 29 or 30. I forget exactly how many at this point. It might have shifted, but it's big and it's causing issues. And so, and that's been the thing that's been on my mind. I've been thinking about the Ashby Elementary and, the possibility of reopening it. But I just keep coming back to the fact that so much additional money would be required that would have to come from somewhere. And, looking at the budget, there's not really a lot of places that money could come from, unless you could somehow convince the towns to, I don't know, pay for it with an override or something like that. But even then, that would just be a 1-year stopgap. It wouldn't solve the longer term problem of how do you sustain that budget. So that's kind of where my mind is right now. That doesn't mean that my mind is made up, but looking at the situation, I don't see a way forward that involves opening Ashby Elementary without making some really devastating sacrifices in terms of number of staff and class sizes.
So when I look at this, it's, from my perspective, is trying to distill the areas into something that is easily digested by the community. So, right now I've got a 6-foot table in front of me with these papers everywhere. And trying to absorb it all, I think it's hard. So when I look at the budget that you presented, first and foremost, there has to be an attempt at meeting what the town administrators asked for. So I think we need that budget and what those reductions would look like. And then a budget, and you have all of the information is here, but for sort of planning purposes, this is the budget that you think that you need. This is what the municipal leaders have said that they would like you to keep your budget at. It would look like this. A reconfiguration to open Ashby would look like this. And I think you need to put some assumed cost in there over the 1.6 for the ADA compliance, because wherever it comes from, when we say the municipal budget or the school budget, it's all one budget. It's all one package, right? So the money's got to come from somewhere. So what that would look like, and then I do think, and it might not be appropriate for FY27, but we have this space issue with the current configuration. So how does that space get alleviated if finance wise somewhere there has to be a building closed, looking looking at this reconfiguration of what a reconfiguration looks like for your needs, whether that's modular classrooms, what that looks like. Like if right now for FY27, to alleviate the space concerns, which you have listed as a priority area, right? And that's what you're here for, is educating the children. To get that extra space that you need right now, what does that look like? Like if you needed 2 modular classrooms at this site and 3 at this site, what does that look like if you asked for it in the FY27 budget? Because that's a part of reconfiguration. Your classroom sizes are not adequate. Is it more space? Is it more teachers? Like what does that look like to be at the optimum student teacher ratio? And what does that budget look like? Because that's your reality, right? Is what you're showing is the class sizes are too big. So if you're going to separate them, do you need more classrooms? Do you just need more teachers? Like, what is that scenario? And what does that budget really look like?
We would actually, just based on the work we've already done, currently, we do not have a space issue. Even if we were to create additional sections. The only place where there are space concerns really are at Varnum Brook. But again, if we're looking to spread the special education sub-separate programs out, those concerns would be eliminated because there is space at both Hawthorne Brook and Spalding. So there's certainly space. There's also space considerations for what we're ultimately going to do at the high school. We could potentially look at, 8th grade being at the high school. We could potentially look at keeping the 8th grade at the middle school level and then moving pre-K to the high school if we need space at Squanicook. So there's definitely opportunities to move some things around with the current space that we have. But I wouldn't say that we have a space issue right now. I cannot predict the future, but ultimately, as we talked about down the road, and it's in the narrative, we do really need to consider something being done on the Squanicook Hawthorne Brook campus to bring that Hawthorne Brook Middle School and that facility up to par.
Right.
And that's something that would certainly eliminate likely any space issues that the district may have, because it could be part of that project. Right now, and again, it's not in writing anywhere, but what the MSBA always looks at and asks about is space. What do you have for space in the district? Where Ashby is currently offline, and it's a leased building, we have less space. With the potential of utilizing Spalding, which is another lease space for any type of a building project for overflow and student placement to get us through a building project, with the plan of potentially moving on from Spalding as well and turning it back over to the town, that could potentially address another space issue that the MSBA has. Now, again, they're not going to come out and say you have too much space. Those are just conversations that I have had with Diane Sullivan at the MSBA. And that's something that they always look at is space. And that's one of the, certainly, I don't think it was helpful in the last time we applied for a project at Hawthorne Brook with the amount of space that we had. But, any potential space issues or growth that the district is going to see over the next, 5 to potentially 10 years could be addressed through a building project. And that would give us the data that we need. And quite honestly, the backup that we need to get the MSBA to support a project, because Hawthorne Brook has to be addressed, and it's not something that the district can handle on its own.
Right. I looked at some of those preliminary numbers that you had given. With the walls that you had, and the elevators and things of that nature, for the future. Jeremy, I see you. Just one thought here. So if the reconfiguration doesn't require new space, you have the existing space to get to the lower class sizes. The increases for the FTEs seems very moderate. And tell me if I'm wrong. It doesn't seem like you're going to alleviate the class size issue with the FTEs that you're asking for. So it's almost like that additional column of like, here's what you're asked for. Here's what the municipalities say they can give. Here's really what you need to optimize your learning environment. And if it's the will of the people to have Ashby open, here's what that costs. So that if that can go on one sheet with that high level, Nancy, the way that you have sort of this page.
Can't see it. Oh.
You can't see it. Yeah. It's the one, doesn't have a page number on it, but it's 1/7/2026 that you did it. And it's the NMFY by appropriation category. So if you've got the administration, then the instructional support, the pupil support.
That's the budget summary page, the very first one. Yep.
So if that page was replicated, and rather when you go right, you have like the budget transfers and the remaining unencumbered and all of that. If it was the current requested from the administration, what it would look like with keeping to the TA's amount, what it would be for you to have the optimum class sizes and everything that you need, and then what it would look like with adding Ashby in, and all of those numbers. So for maybe the expanded staff, so that it's a lower student to pupil ratio, is like in this big packet. But I think it's just harder for people to look at. And the budget to get to the percentage that the TAs were looking at, somewhere in all of these numbers, right? And it's not for us to tell you where, because that's part of your day to day, but to look at these categories of what could potentially be areas to shift funding, or to really look to make sure that there's not duplication of funding. Like when you asked for the teachers, and I know, Nancy, you were getting us information on actual numbers hired as opposed to the projected numbers of hires, how many positions were left vacant that you had to take in contractual services, whatever that might look like. Because I think the communities need to see the impact of each one of those scenarios. And if the ask for the potential override, small numbers, right? If it's $100, that is the ask right now, but you still don't have the optimum learning environment, but for $103 you do. Like, I think we just need to see that on one sheet to really decide from a policy perspective of what we say the budget is, right? Because we're going to have to take a vote at some point to say, this is what we vote on for your budget. Is that making sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay.
I guess I'll jump in. One of the things I would recommend, especially for the towns approved, what they think, what they can support, is to wait for the governor's proposal, because that may or may not impact any particular town. And or, obviously the state aid portion will be coming in at that point. So it's the tricky part is it wouldn't be too difficult, I think, to do a one pager that has the current budget, a town approved budget pending those changes, The AES column we've already been working on. And the optimum, meaning class sizes, are where we'd like them to be. So really it's four scenarios. Do
Yeah.
I have
and
that
there's more.
correct?
Yeah.
And then the differences between those.
Yeah. I understand you don't have all the information that you potentially will have in the future, but even just kind of setting that up as a straw man with some drag and drop. I think the other thing that could be helpful for community is to understand, you've got the going backwards in the document here, um, the all of the different funds, revolving funds. If that was a table for when we start talking about um, the budget in its totality, because now the budget message is out there, so that we can look at the budget and budget planning to say these are areas that are designated funds that can't be used. These are grants. This is the operating. And just as you're looking at that, because the underspending was not consistent enough from what I initially saw, from what Kevin had shared with me, doesn't have clear trends. If there can just be a real extra look back, and not saying anything would be intentional, but of sort of the duplication of funds and what I mentioned about you had planned to have a teacher, and so that it's in this teacher budget, but you had to shift it to another budget, because to get from where you're at to what the municipalities initially said isn't a huge amount. It would have an impact on the budget, but just sort of double looking at all of the different areas to see. And then my final thing is, long term, we're not going to solve it because we don't know this. Is that the impact of the insurance and what that might mean for an override ask? So, and I know that's an unknown.
I did just want to point out too, and sorry, Lisa, I don't mean to jump over you, but I just want to be clear so that everyone's aware of this, because I'm not sure, and again, if anyone from the public is on, but as you know, the towns asked for 3%. We're at 3.06. We are really not close to what the towns have asked for, because the assessments, they were asking for a 3% assessment.
Right.
So that would require a substantial reduction for us to get there. Just to clarify that for anyone that may not know that. The other piece is that one of the issues in this budget, because we were trying to be cognizant of what the towns were asking us, was to try to put forth a budget that was as minimalistic as possible. And we haven't really addressed all of our class size issues and our ask, but I will say that the way things will shift next year, again, we're not sure what kindergarten's going to look like, and we never are until late in the summer. But those large kindergarten class sizes won't be as large in first grade because we have more staff in the first grade. And some of our other, so things seem to be matching out well, and we do have a potential solution to address the grade 7 and 8 issues in both buildings, which isn't optimal by any means, but it would alleviate the large class sizes in grade 7 and 8 without the addition of more staff as well. So we're trying to be as creative as possible, optimize our staff to the best of our ability, while at the same time, again, being cognizant of what the town's asks are, because they have, they have significant issues of their own that they have to deal with.
Right. And in big picture, I know you don't think or you think it's large. The difference between the 3% and the 4% for the assessment, relatively speaking, from looking around the state, is not as large as some. I know it's an impact for you, but quite honestly, I expected it to be a bigger delta from what the administration will be asking for and what the municipalities could support. So I expected it to be much larger, superintendent. So
yeah, and I think
I'm not dismissing that it's not an impact to you, but it's not at all what I expected. But we have to have people see what that looks like. Go ahead, Lisa. I know we've put you on hold a little bit there.
No, I was going to. So, Kim, I'm just going back to what you want them to do. You want them their wish list. Is that correct? You want a wish list budget.
I don't call it a wish list, Lisa. What I hear from the administration is there's some specific needs that probably are not in this current budget. For the optimum. And so when it's the education of the kids, that I see no fluff anywhere. Sorry, people are moving on the screen here. Just move from my left or my right. So I don't think it's a wish list. I think it's to operate in the highest, most effective manner for the education of the children. It would be this.
Our true needs list. Our true needs list is what budget you're looking for, like the true needs.
Yeah.
Yes, we can optimize it down to this, but we would prefer this one.
Yeah. Right. I feel like the administration is moving the chairs on the deck right now.
Well, I think they're doing that at the request of the towns, though. I think that we've had these issues for long enough that like the towns said, this is how much we can afford to increase the budget. And so the administration has said, okay, we're going to try to meet that target. And presenting, like, I understand what you're saying is like, here is, if we were trying to do everything the right way and weren't like making all of these sacrifices, what would the budget look like? And then here's all the things we're going to sacrifice to get the budget down to the level that you guys want it to be at. Basically saying we're already not doing all of these things. To ask us to not do even more things is to say that, like, we're cutting, we're not doing all this stuff already because we can't afford to. To tell us to not do even more is to really hamstring the district.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's exactly it. So the reconfiguration to go back to Ashby, costs. A reconfiguration right now you don't need for buildings. In the future you might, from what I'm hearing from you. So the reconfiguration for that is a reconfiguration with teachers within the current campuses. So it's, if there's 10 classrooms in the hallway and 7 are being used, the reconfiguration is using all 10 classrooms to get class sizes down to 21, whatever that scenario is, sir. And then the previous underspending, what we've looked at, doesn't have enough of a trend, but there might be some areas that, in order to meet what the municipalities have requested, this is where it would have to come from. This is where it gets shaved out. I think that's the only way that we can truly analyze all the great information that you've pulled together for us in a way that's condensed enough to look at, this is what the potential override to fund the school would look like.
So let me ask the administration, is this something that can be done?
Yeah, I don't see why we can't do some kind of scenarios, especially since we're doing it at that high level.
Yes.
I will point out that the one reason we're at a 3.06, or one of the largest reasons we're at a 3.06 and not like last year we were at 5.48% increase, is due to the tuition changes. So if you look at that section under the budget by function, you'll see large reductions. I mean, it's really between all those lines down the 9,000 series. You're looking at, almost an $800,000 reduction in tuition cost in the general fund budget. So without that, if we were level funding tuitions from last year to this next year, we wouldn't be in as good a shape as far as the increases go. And we wouldn't be that close to meeting what the towns are looking for. I'm just trying to point this up because this won't be here next year.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I can't imagine that for 2 years in a row, we'll have an $800,000 reduction in tuition. So it's long term. And I think that's the other thing about projecting the budget for, this is what it looks like for FY27. But you also then have to realize that you're keeping that, let's say we have a reconfiguration, we're keeping that going forward. So, I mean, I think I don't think there's any scenario where we don't have one building closing, because even if we did a reconfiguration, as an example, that'll be the hardest one to reconfigure, to give a scenario, because we have Ashby at the moment not being utilized. That means all the students that are at Squanicook are going somewhere. That building is now not utilized. So I need to know, I kind of need to know what we'd be looking at with the other buildings in order to project it.
And I think on top of that, I think we need to know what we're being asked. I mean, if we're being asked to look at a plan where Ashby Elementary is reopened, what does that reopening look like? Just keeping in mind that, I mean, just based on the past, we absolutely will need an administrator there. We can't not have an administrator in all of our buildings, which we've done without previously. We just can't do that anymore. But are we talking about a K-2 option? Are we talking about K-4? Are we talking about just Ashby, or are we talking about Ashby and Townsend? That's something that we really need to know. Are we looking at just reopening Ashby and going back to the way it was previous?
So for that level, my perspective is that is then us taking over day-to-day operations. And so if we're asking you to look at reconfiguration, and so we know that there's a sentiment from folks, some, that Ashby needs to be reopened. So day to day, what does that look like for you? Like, I'm not going to tell you who needs to be in that building. You know what you need. So if it's an administrator, if it's a nurse, it's this, it's that. And to make it work, you need it to be these grades, and they need to come from these towns. That's, I think, more on your technical expertise of what you need,
Okay,
than us saying it has to be these grades. We're asking you for the scenarios, and it's the same with, reconfiguration. If you don't need to reconfigure structure of any of the current facilities that are in use, and it's just reconfiguration internally of those structures, but by more staff, that's okay. Long-term reconfiguration looking at, I think, is another discussion topic. But I don't think, hearing from what you've said, that the feasibility to close an additional building, which was requested of you from a town administrator, is feasible or possible at this moment without other changes that would require funding. So if you closed another building, you would have to, at some point, have additional space. So I don't think that's our ask, from my perspective, from the finance committee, for this year, unless something drastic happens. So that is just a reconfiguration of what it would look like in that building from your perspective. You've got to manage the whole process.
So the only remaining questions that I have is that any type of reopening is going to require some type of vote, whether it be an override. If we were to consider redistricting Townsend, again, Townsend would be, in fact, buying into Ashby Elementary School and capital projects. That's going to require voting. And
yes,
just so the central office team is clear, the expectation was that we were going to have a decision on Ashby Elementary by our January 27th meeting. This is potentially putting us into the voting season, which is late spring, potentially, and not having a direction from which to work in until we have the results of a vote on determining if a building is being reopened or not reopened. I just want to be clear on that. We are, in fact, going to be putting ourselves back into the same situation, unless I'm misreading this, that we were in last year.
Well, if I were to look at it now without all those figures in front of me, just distilling everything from the packet, financially, the impact is larger to reopen that facility, right? Right. So the money isn't even there right now to operate your basic needs to keep the school functioning, let alone what I'm hearing from our different meetings, full school committee and our subcommittees, is that the learning environment for the children is not optimum because of lack of budget to have the staff that you need. So you've got multiple issues that you're facing with. Town says you have this much. This is what you actually need to have the optimum learning environment. That's one budget. So then we have the budget that you asked for or you've developed. And then there's the additional line or column in the budget of the reconfiguration. If Ashby were to reopen, that would cost X. And you've got it in the packet, but it's just moving some of this information into columns. So it's all in one spot so that people can see it to make that decision. Like you said, we as the committee will ultimately make that decision based on the information that you bring us. And the biggest thing with Ashby right now, aside from long term, is the ADA compliance. We have an unknown that we have no control over right now. And so you've got to put a best guess placeholder from what Jeremy knows from the walkthrough. So trying to get a hold of that report is paramount. Ashby needs to get that into the hands of the school committee.
Yeah. But I don't think Ashby has a lot of control over that though, because that's up, the state is it's sort of in their hands at this point. There's a whole lot of things that none of us, either in the district or in the towns, have any real control over, unfortunately.
Understood, but us as a school committee, until we get that, we don't know what that implication is.
But so I think we kind of have to just go forward with I don't know, a guess or an assumption. Like it's going to cost some amount of money. It could be a relatively small amount. It could be quite a large amount, but it's going to cost something. So we just kind of, you move forward with, okay, it'll cost something. Maybe it'll be $10,000. Maybe it'll be $100,000. Maybe it'll be $1 million. I have no idea. I have no conception for how much fixing that would cost. But
that's why that placeholder, I'm okay with Jeremy doing his best estimate based on what he knows. That's what everybody's doing right now.
So I think but I do like the idea of like here's optimum fund, like here's what we would really need, here is what we would need plus opening Ashby, and here's what we're asking for, here's all the things that we have taken out of what we need to get to that like 3% figure, which is actually still too high. But anyways, the point is, I think I can see what you're getting at, which is we need to make people understand that like the budget that we're asking for is already sacrificing a lot. It's already not addressing some things that, were we not dealing with all of these budget constraints, we would be spending more money on these things, and we're choosing not to in order to bring the budget under a certain amount. So what are all of those costs that we are not spending for this fiscal year because we're trying to keep the budget under a certain amount? Like, what are all those things? Because if you point all of those things out to people and say, here's the things we're not doing specifically to save money in the budget, it might be an easier sell to say like that's why this budget is the way it is.
Right. And I think the other thing that would be informative, for the class size, I think it's hard for when you just have the average, right? So I want to look at mean, median, and mode. Most people, there's this number under, at, or over what is optimum. and we might not have any that are under. But I think rather than looking at the average, if people knew grade 5, there's this many in the correct spot, and this many has way too many kids, and this one, could move a kid. I think that's easier for the public to understand with the implications. So if the budget that the municipalities ask for means that there's X number of classrooms over the optimum, and then the budget that you're going to give us that corrects this, right, then they can see what the give and take is. And then it's not just a budget figure. It shows the direct connection to the children.
Yeah, because fundamentally that's the need that really needs to be met is the educational needs of the students, and class sizes in the 30 plus range are not conducive to a good classroom environment, which hampers learning.
Right. Jeremy, I see your hand up.
So I guess a couple of points of clarification. I respectfully disagree that creating an estimate on the ADA costs is a good plan. My concern there is that we don't know the scope of what might be involved. We at best might get an answer when the town gets an answer as to what is required for the front entry, but that is not necessarily a complete look. And I don't know, we don't have a path at the moment to get a complete look. I'm afraid that if we put a number to that, it is either going to be woefully under budgeted, or it's going to be seen as over bloated, and that is not going to help the conversations either. As it is, the numbers we put in there, I think if we opened Ashby, we tried to answer that in the narrative, and the numbers we used were somewhat purposely conservative when in doubt, because we want to make it clear that we're not trying to overbloat the budget for these purposes.
So I like the first part, the correction of this is not ADA compliance. This is just addressing the front entry. I think that's a really good thing to point out, and we need to change our language on that, because that does give a misinterpretation that what's being looked at now is ADA compliance. So we should probably make that of the current complaint, addressing the current ADA complaint of the front entryway, because you're 100% correct. It doesn't address it all.
Yeah, there's other potential issues, but we have no sort of insight into real insight into any of those, because those weren't looked at, because they were only looking at that specific complaint.
Yeah. So I agree with that disagreement that you have, Jeremy. What I think we have to somehow though have what that perspective could be, and I don't know an easy way to get that. Do we go on, like, this is what a replacement cost would be? That would be overbloated, right? Because it's not full replacement unless it needs to be widened. Like if adding that railing on the lower end does not have the correct width, so then you've got to widen it. So then there is a reconstruction piece of it.
Yeah.
I think for example of the grading for the handicap parking, that's something that I think could get a quote on that is fairly reliable. I know that it won't be actual, but I know that the number that's on the paper right now, the 1.6 million, isn't the whole number. So I don't want to have people look at that number either.
Yeah, I think maybe we just need to, when we're talking about these numbers, we say that obviously you can say their estimates all you want, but people are going to see the numbers and they're going to assume that that's the numbers. I mean, maybe you just put a plus at the end of the number and say, and just always note that, like, there's unknowns, and that those unknowns could result in the number being higher, because in fact, are likely to result in the number being higher. But again,
Yeah.
we don't know for sure. So,
Yeah.
because I think that if you say this is the number, and then people say, well, okay, we just need to find exactly that much money and we can solve the problem. And then of course you have to say, well,
Yeah.
no, that's still potentially not enough. And so,
Yeah. So maybe a footnote, Jeremy, would you be okay with like a footnote of like what we know now of
yeah,
potential? And by the time we get this, maybe Ashby will be able to get their hands on the report.
yeah,
So it all depends on the time frame of that, which
Right.
one, I'm assuming, including Ashby leadership, knows what the time frame would be. And I wouldn't want to put numbers in even without knowing what the state is requiring, even for the front entry.
yeah,
Uh, and it will take time to get all of those numbers, time that I don't know that we properly have
Have.
in order to put together next year's budget to move forward. Uh, my personal feeling, and this is speaking only for myself, is that this is kind of a minimum cost if we want to prioritize opening Ashby.
Yes.
Uh, I agree with you that having this is what it would take us to get to where we should be would be nice, but there are a lot of variables and a lot of work that goes into that as well. Be aware of that. There's a lot of hours, and there's a limitation to that scope. For instance, do we go as far back as reinstating the librarians we cut several years ago? How far back and how far do we go in those scenarios? And I think realistically speaking, we're not going to get that needs list. And that's personal opinion, granted, but we're not going to get that list anyhow. I think the budget that we've put forward is probably the max we're going to get.
yeah. I would tend to agree with that. I think it's not about expecting to get that budget. I think it's about painting the picture for the public that like this is not like you may think this budget is too high, but like if we were actually trying to maintain like a level of sort of services and staffing and whatnot that we like would sort of ideally have, then this is what it would cost. And and I know it will probably be a much higher number, and it could vary depending upon like
Right.
decisions that you make, like how far back do you go. But like I'd say even if you just go back like a few years, or maybe you go back to like 2019 or something, like the pre-COVID years when before COVID sort of threw everything into a disarray. I think that people are losing perspective on the fact that like the schools are already cutting a ton of things that like again, if the budgets were sort of being properly supported, we wouldn't be cutting. So I think that per, presenting that information in a way, and I think again, like those figures don't need to be super precise. They just need to be kind of ballpark, just to give an idea of like, okay, if we actually wanted to get to like where we should be realistically in terms of class sizes, then like what would that take? Again, and averages versus maximums and all that stuff. Like, if you could just get it so that maximum class size is below a certain amount, or
Right.
like 26 or something, or if because average is not really a super useful measure in my opinion, because you can have outliers that throw it off, but maximum and median like would be good, trying to get that down. And I know that's not trivial to do, but I feel like if you could just get a ballpark figure that say it would cost like X millions of dollars more to get to that point, then the budget that we're actually presenting in order to get it passed will seem much more reasonable when you're looking at like, here's what we really should be doing versus what we are doing.
Right. And Jeremy, for me, when I say this, I'm not telling the superintendent I want librarians back or I want this back. I need to rely on his expertise to say, for the optimum learning environment with what we're faced with right now, I need X number of this, I need X number of that. I can be descriptive. I won't be prescriptive because that's not my job. My job is to ask the superintendent, in order for you to most effectively educate the students right now, what do you need? because I don't think it's the budget that's been presented. Right? I think you've tried to pare back as much as you can to get to the ask of the town administrators, understandably. But in looking, and I mentioned, like, I'm used to looking at mean, median, and mode, and I want to know right now how many of the classrooms are oversized. And I would then guess that the optimum budget for the superintendent would be looking at getting them all to X. And so I'll put numbers out there that aren't real. If the best number is 100 and 70% of the classrooms right now are at 110, and it would cost X to get it down to 100, then that's what I want to see. And if there's something that's been cut that the superintendent knows from his years of expertise is limiting the learning for the children, I need to hear that, because I'm never going to be able to create that. And I don't know, Jeremy, if we're going to ask for an override, I have no perspective if the budget that you've presented right now, if that override is pretend $5, right? I use fake numbers just for illustrative. If it's $5, but to get to the optimum, it's $6.50. Well, that might be what we want to ask for. If we got to ask for an override, have it be an override that's going to change the environment. If numbers are that close, if it's $5 now and you got to ask for $27, well, that's not going to fly. Right? But just showing the difference, I think, is helpful to us from a policy perspective and an ask perspective if we know that information. And right now, I don't know that. Like, I know some information. That's one bit of information I don't know. And maybe others on the committee that have been here longer know that. I don't. I can't be helpful to the education process of the kids if I don't know that.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I know we've been here a long time. Is there any unanswered questions right now from the committee?
So, Kim, just going back to this for a second, is finance assigning something for the administration to do so that it's all clear to what we would like them to do?
Yes. I don't think it needs a procedural vote. It's an ask. If you'd like to take a vote, we can do a vote. But the ask is to consolidate the information that's here into one sheet. What it would look like, because we have to be prepared for the answer is no to any override. So what does that look like? Then what it looks like now, add in the 1.6 million to open Ashby. What does that look like? And then, that figure, the superintendent asked, like, what does that include? Well, we have this 1.6. So if that, whatever that includes for you, and it's that 1.6, just use that number for that next column. I think the column that they might not have is what it looks like optimally.
Yeah.
For 27.
Yeah.
But I think everything else is in the packet somewhere, right? It's just getting it all onto one page, or a few pages, realistically.
So let me ask, does the administration understand the task? Just to
I think
to have it all clear and everybody.
I'm pretty clear. I guess this is maybe a question for the superintendent, but does our optimal include a reopening of any buildings? Because I guess that would change. Are we saying optimal without the opening of the building?
I
don't know how to, that's the only column I'm a little unsure
from my
on.
perspective, I would say optimum with what you have right now, because for us to ask you to do that with an unknown, like, you can easily take what the what has been asked of
Mhm.
you have your ask already. So what's asked of you, and then your ask already, and then the next column is just literally placing the Ashby onto that. But then we don't know whether Ashby can or can't open. And then the other one, I would say, using the facilities that you have now. That's my perspective, because we know that.
Okay,
We know what buildings you have right
that
now.
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Brad, are you good with that?
I'm good.
Okay. There's probably lots of other things to talk about, but we could be here for a weekend. So our next agenda item was on the enrollment projections. Is there anything that you wanted to share forward on that?
I don't have anything unless Nancy does.
I think the only comment I'll make on enrollments is that the NASDAQ projections have been released. I believe they're linked in the
Budget mess.
budget message.
Yes.
The difference that I'm seeing in those compared to other releases of that is that there's a slow reduction continuing for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not drastic, but it's before this was rather level. So this, and I reached out to them and spoke to somebody or exchanged communication with them. And really the reason for the change is that they go ahead and project what the enrollment's going to be. And then in this case, we didn't hit the benchmark. So if we'd hit what they projected, say for FY26 enrollment, they might have changed the way that the 10-year projection works. So I think it's just an information point. It means that we got to watch it. We got to continue to watch it and look at the numbers. So I think I wanted to just highlight it. That's all.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the link being in there. And obviously, there are some drivers in Pepperell that will slowly impact that depending on where some of those development goes. We don't need to delve into that, but I appreciate that. Okay. I just didn't know if there was anything other than that we needed to be aware of. Any committee members have any questions on that?
No.
Okay. Our next meeting, do we need to potentially plan one in anticipation of the governor's budget sooner than later, or what's your thought, Mike and Lisa, on when we should meet again?
I'd say, we probably need enough time for the administration to take that information and turn it into, basically update the draft budget. So I would say, how long would that take once the governor's budget is out? How long does updating the budget to account for those new numbers take?
A couple of days seem reasonable.
Yeah, a couple of days.
Yeah.
Okay. So we could schedule one in the week following the release of the governor's budget. I think that would be reasonable.
Okay.
What is the date that the governor's budget is saying to be released? Nancy?
I was just digging for that because I think there was an email from Mars on it and while we were talking. So I think it's January 23rd.
That's what I saw.
At the general session, Friday, January 23rd will come the day after the governor's annual State of the Commonwealth address and just a few days before she is due to file her fiscal 27 budget. So that's 27th or 23rd is the Friday. So midweek of
Next week.
the week of the 26th, I would say.
And that school committee meeting is on the 27th?
Is there?
That's correct, right?
So should we try for that Monday?
I think it makes sense.
The 25th? Or the 26th?
26.
Yeah.
We would just, so Actually, just let me double check
Oh,
that.
did you say the 20? Yeah, that's close.
That's giving you a day.
Yeah,
A
that's
day,
probably too
yeah.
quick.
I mean,
Right.
I can update the committee. I'll have updates as soon as they come out. As long as the Chapter 70 workbook is released, I'll be able to give updates on the enrollments and the revenue projections.
Okay.
Regardless, I just might not have implemented all of the files and for the packet.
Yeah. So let's keep it on the agenda. I mean, can put that meeting for that date. We'll put the various items on the agenda. And then if we have to pull them back because we don't have the information, then we can do that.
So the 26th, do you want to meet at 8 a.m. again, or that's a
That works.
Monday?
That works for me.
It works for me as well. I mean, we can verify with Keenan too
Okay.
that he does not have class that day or that early or
Yeah, and 26th would also work for me.
Is this mainly going to be to discuss the budget? So that's what will be on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
If we'll have the certifications. Hopefully we'll have the governor's budget information, all of those different topics. And so I think keeping our general topics, our check-in on the 26 FY26 budget, and then, continue with our planning. We may or may not have the information from Ashby, from the state, I should say, on Ashby, that they're not developing it, and just keep moving forward. And that'll also give us some insight from any of our discussions that come up at our regular meeting tonight that we might need to add in, Robin. So, okay. I don't have any other business not reasonably anticipated, and none of the members brought that up. So I think we're good there. Robin, was any sign up for the closing public comment?
Yeah. No, there's none.
Okay. If there's not any additional questions or comments from anyone,
no. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
all right.
Second.
So we have a motion from Lisa Martin and a second from Michael Bossier. So we'll take a roll call vote. Lisa Martin,
Yes.
Michael Bossier,
Yes.
and Kim Craven. I'm a yes. Thank you so much to all of you in the administration for getting us through this meeting and weeding through it all and hearing us out. I really do appreciate the attentiveness that you have for our questions. So we'll see you soon.
Have a good day, everyone.
See you tonight.
All right, bye.
Bye.